So it was about 7 years ago, and I was going through my divorce. And I was in this alley in downtown Ravenna, and I had just gotten my ass handed to me again by the judge. And I was literally kicking a dumpster and screaming at the top of my lungs. People were probably looking at me in town going, what the hell is wrong with this dude? But that's where I was at mentally. And what I want to tell you is divorce is pretty much the worst. I've lost both my parents, didn't even come close to losing my family. The impact of that. Someone had put it to me this way one time, and I thought this was the best analogy for divorce. He said, it's like slowly sawing off your leg to save your life, and then you walk around the rest of your life with a limp. And that really hit me, because I can tell you the pain that I went through, it was excruciating. It was terrible. And I don't want that for any of you guys in here, right? Now, here are the statistics. In the fire service, the divorce rate, it's 80%. That's crazy high, and I'm sure Cliff could speak on law enforcement. It's even higher in law enforcement, right? So I think it's time that we at least have a conversation about it, right? Especially for the young guys, so they can know like what they're up against and what they're facing in their marriage. But I want you guys to know that you're all batting from a handicap just because of your job, right? You're gonna have to do extra in your marriage to keep that thing alive, right? Firefighters are 3 times more likely to divorce than the general public. And this is a scary thing. The divorce rate is even higher among female firefighters, which begs a whole nother slew of questions. But it is a problem, and I think it is worth talking about, for sure. And here are some things that we don't think about. Like divorce, we think it's gonna solve one problem. But what it really does is it creates a whole slew of new problems, right? And things that would be specific to a fireman, you know, child custody issues. You know, you have an irregular work schedule, right? That makes everything complicated in court. You might lose custody of your kids just because of what you do, right? Then there's the pension and the retirement. I can tell you guys right now, you guys get married, or if you are married, and in Ohio, and you guys divorce, half of your retirement is gone. Half. No way around it. Ohio Revised Code, right? That's a lot of money if you're in your 50s, right? You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Gone, right? Goodbye. And spousal support, the court, they don't care that it's overtime, right? They're not gonna factor in just your regular pay and leave the overtime out. They factor in all your income, right? So now you've kind of set yourself up for just working overtime just to make ends meet. But I can tell you, in a divorce, whether you're the man, the woman, the perpetrator, or the victim, doesn't matter, your lifestyle will be cut in half, period. I can tell you that right now. And it'll take you an average of 3 to 5 years to dig yourself out of the financial ruin that divorce could put you in. Not to mention all the problems with your kids. Creates a whole nother slew of issues. I had a daughter. All my other kids were okay through my divorce, but man, it hit my one daughter, and it hit her hard. And as soon as that divorce happened, she started getting in trouble. She started running with the wrong people. There's a whole myriad of complications that come from divorce. Responder marriages were just at a higher risk for disharmony, infidelity, and divorce, just based on the profession. Firemen, and I think law enforcement could be lumped in there along with nurses. That's a high rate of infidelity in those positions. It's a cheating profession. Long shifts. in odd hours, overtime, callback, right? This affects everything. Holidays, parties, I'm sure somebody has gotten in trouble at least once by a girlfriend or their wife because I had to miss this or couldn't be here for that. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. We also have, as firemen, we don't want to miss out. We have that FOMO. We don't want to miss a training. We don't want to miss this. We don't want to miss that. Like we will never say no to overtime, right? But what we're doing is we're sacrificing our family, Now we're going to factor in all the mental health and the PTSD problems that our spouses have to deal with, right? They have to deal with our mood swings, any kind of issues, anger issues, right? This all adds stress at home, right? And not to mention, let's be honest, firemen, cops, we're not killing it financially. We're not. We do the job because we love it. We're doing the job because we want to help people, but we're not doing the job to get rich, We have a tendency to live separate lives, You have your fire family and you have your home family. Well, this can make problems. This can divide our energy. This can divide our attention from our spouses. These are all things that we have to consider. You talk to a lot of spouses, and a lot of them will struggle with the jealousy of the fire family, right? You're gonna emotionally confide in your brothers at work, but you're not gonna tell me, you're not gonna talk to me when you come home, right? And a lot of times the responder doesn't want to talk when they get home, and we think in our mind, oh, we're protecting our spouses. They don't want to hear this today. They don't want to hear, about this Sid's baby that died, They don't want to hear that. We don't want to talk about it, but really, when you talk to these spouses, they will tell you they want to talk about it. They want to be that rock, right? In our minds, we're protecting them, but really what we're doing is we're isolating them. And that's something to keep in mind. And at the end of the day, if you can't confide in your wife or your girlfriend, then you need to reconsider your wife or your girlfriend, right? But don't exclude them. Trust is a big problem in a responder marriage, right? You're out and about. You're around a lot of people. You're not home, right? How do you know what your old lady's doing while you're on shift? You really have no idea. You can't leave the station and go check on her, right? So these are all things that we need to just have in the back of our mind because, like I said before, we're batting from a handicap already, right? That means we're going to have to work extra hard in our relationships just based on what we do. Stress. The stress from this job will spill over into your relationship, period. There's no way around it. There's no way around it. But one thing we have to be careful of, and Tony has talked about this before, is comparing our stresses to our wife or our girlfriend's stress, right? We shouldn't do that. We could come home and the old lady's like, I had the worst Girl Scout meeting and this mom took $10 from the Girl Scout cookies and lied about it and she's all upset. And you're like, that's great. I just had an MBA where 3 teenagers died. Sweet, right? We got to be careful with that. I'm guilty of it. I'm sure the captain is guilty of that, right? We can't. That's a big deal to them. Just like job-related incidents are a big deal to us, right? So that's something we got to be cognizant of when we're dealing with our spouses, right? And we have to know that they really don't understand, which this ties into our separate family, our separate life away from home. We have a tendency to confide and emote to our brothers because they understand, right? But your spouse, really, unless they're in the responder services in some way, shape, or form, they really don't, they have a very limited understanding of the jobs and the struggles, right? So it's up to you guys to educate them, to teach them, to tell them, to say, hey, the other day when I got pissed off and I kicked a hole in the wall and we were fighting, I struggle with some anger. You know, maybe I got some PTSD. Maybe I should talk to a counselor, right? These are things that you need to talk about with your spouse. Your spouse needs to know. Your spouse needs to prepare for any kind of incidents that happen at home, right? They need to have that understanding. Don't be shy. Talk to them about this stuff. So I just wanted to do a slide on active listening because I know, and I'm guilty of this. No, we're not good listeners necessarily, right? So things that we need to be cognizant of is what and how and when and what is not being said, right? When we're listening. We've got to focus on these 4 things, right? And really pay attention to when our spouses are talking. And at the same time, your spouse or girlfriend, they need to understand this as well, right? With good communication, and you hear this, it's almost cliche, you hear it all the time. A good relationship has good communication. Well, that's true. There's a lot of truth in that. We have to communicate. It is so important. This is a big one with me. And this is something I want everyone in this room to do. And this is something your spouses, they have to let you do this, right? And ultimately it helps them too, okay? So if you go back to biblical times, right? The warriors would go out and they would fight the battle. And they would go into a village, they're killing men, women, children, all the livestock, burning the huts to the ground. And they weren't allowed back in to the city for 2 weeks. They had to literally live outside the walls of the ancient cities for 2 weeks. And the reason being was they would come back all deranged and crazy and psycho, right? And they weren't allowed back in. They had to decompress, and they knew this 3,500 years ago. Now fast forward to 2024. Are we really doing this? Are we really doing this? And what's interesting with like the World War II vets, if you look at the numbers, right, there wasn't a huge problem with suicide, alcohol addiction, or crime, or anything like that with the World War II vets. And there's a theory on this, basically saying that, you know, when the war was over, everyone had to travel by boat to get back home. It took 2 weeks to cross the ocean, right? These guys were now not in combat. They're on the boat, they're around each other, they're talking through things, they're emoting, right? They were allowed to decompress after that war, and by the time they got off the boat, a lot of those guys were fine. Now you look at the Afghanistan and Iraqi war vets, what happens? They get on a C-130, they go to Germany, within another 18 hours, they're back in the States and they're sitting in the living room. Is that really what we need to do? They've gone from combat to their living room in about 18 to 24 hours, right? There's no room for decompression there. Well, this works with you guys too. When you get off your shift, especially if it's a bad shift, take an hour or 2 and decompress by yourself. Do whatever that is. It could be staring at your phone, laying on your bed. It could be watching a TV show, a football game, riding your motorcycle for an hour. You have to decompress, right? Because you don't want to come home like a deranged, crazy psycho warrior, right? You're revved up, hopped up on caffeine. You had all this crazy adrenaline all night while you were at work because you ran all these crazy calls, and now you're at home, right? Take that time. You're doing your family a favor, and you're doing yourself a favor, right? And make it a non-negotiable in your relationship. They're just gonna have to understand, and they need to know that it's for their benefit as well. Because the last thing you want to do is have a busy night where you ran 5 calls after midnight, you didn't get any sleep, 2 of those calls were hellacious, and now you're home and your spouse is in your ear about the 50 things you got to do today now that you're off your shift, right? That's just going to add to your stress already, right? That's why decompression, it's so important. It's something that we need to get in the practice of, like stretching or, you know, going for a run or working out. You're doing it for your mind, and you're doing it for your family, and you're doing it to keep the peace in your house. And the last thing I wanted to talk about before I turn it over to Cliff, keeping the peace at home, right? We operate in chaos when we're at work. We don't want to bring that chaos home, right? Our house is our sanctuary, right? Things that we can do, and we talked about this just a minute ago. Good communication, proper communication, right? Not angry communication, calm communication, honest communication. And we want to prioritize our family, right? We don't want to prioritize our fire family over our home family. We want to make sure that we pencil in that time to be with our spouses. This one is specific to each individual. Self-care. We got to take care of ourselves. That could come in the form of a hike, a motorcycle ride, playing pickleball, whatever that is to you, right? You have to make sure that you're doing something for yourself. Because you come to work, you're making sacrifices for all these people you don't even know. And potentially you could be sacrificing your life, right? Then you go home and you make sacrifices for your family all day long, right? I mean, we don't want to mow the lawn today necessarily, but we have to. We make that sacrifice, right? Well, we've got to sacrifice for ourselves too, right? Self-care is so important. However you guys want to manage your stress, that kind of ties into the self-care, right? I use exercise. I exercise more for my mind than my body, honestly. And there's always professional help that we can seek if we feel like we're circling the drain. There's at the county level, we have that help available to us. We could hire a counselor. There's marriage counselors if we need it. These are all things that we just need to keep in the back of our mind to know that this is all available. But I don't want any of you guys to go through what I did in my divorce. I can tell you, it was excruciating, tearing, gut-wrenching pain. It took me years to get through. It never stopped. It was pretty, I gotta say, the worst thing I ever went through in my life. And again, while we think it solves one problem, it creates a myriad of other problems. Right? Yes, sir.
Quick question, Tom. So are you saying that we should not get divorced if it's necessary, or are you trying to help us to not get to that point and try hard before it has to happen?
Well, yeah, ideally. What I want you guys to know is you're back from a handicap. So right off the rip, I don't care if you're married for a year, right? You're gonna have to work harder. You're gonna have to try harder. We can't just throw out ourselves, well, it's the job. And you're just gonna have to deal with it. You married a fireman, right? I mean, that's really not fair, right? I will do everything in my power to talk somebody out of a divorce. And I get approached a lot, guys going through a divorce, or they're considering it, my buddy. I've talked so many guys off the ledge. And I tell them, I go, you have no idea. The grass is not greener. It's not. Your life isn't going to get easier. And I go back to that analogy that I said earlier. It's like you have to slowly saw off your leg to save your life. Now you're walking around without a leg the rest of your life.
Go find anybody on this job. Our job as policemen or you as firemen, and it's an old timer and married to the same person that when they got on the job they were married to. You will not find one of them. They all had the same beefs, they all had the same struggles, they all wanted to put a pillow over her head once in a while, but they stayed married. And at the end of that, you will not find one of them that says they regret that. We just have this tendency to believe that, oh, I'm not happy. Well, guess what? Marriage doesn't always come in happy. It comes in work, right? And at different times of our, through that marriage with what we do, we're gonna have to struggle a little bit. But for some reason, we'll throw that away. We won't throw other shit away. We'll go to bat for, if there was a fire, you guys are crawl through, shit to get to a baby and save that baby. But you won't sit at a kitchen table with your wife and talk about some hard issues because it's gonna fix your marriage. So our pride gets in the way, and we don't know how to do that, give that up and surrender that. And a real strong man, I understand what we do, we think it's strong, but that's what we do. That's not hard for me, right? That's not hard for you guys to go into that fire. But giving up that pride and sitting at a table and humbling yourself is hard. And see, so we transition that and exchange that. Other people would say going into the fire is hard, and what we do with my marriage is we find that the thing that we do best. And the thing that we don't do well, we do poorly, and we really fuck it up. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that was great, Cliff. That was great. But I would do everything in my power to talk a guy out. And like Cliff said, they never regret staying. You know, because what will happen is this job will go away, and you'll retire.
More female.
Yeah.
Top females out. Fire
What's
females. We have more females joining the service now.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and you saw that statistic. They're more likely to get divorces too. But yeah, I would never ever recommend a divorce. You would never hear me advocate for that. Never. Not knowing what I know and being through what I've been through. And like Cliff said, we gotta drop the egos. We gotta drop the egos. It's not about winning, right?